unexpected follow-up question.
And your mind just goes totally blank.
It's wild. You just freeze. You end up like pointing at a pastry and grunting like a caveman.
It is a uniquely humbling experience, honestly. I mean, the illusion of competence you built up in your living room just shatters the moment you introduce real-world pressure.
Yeah, pressure and, an unpredictable human being into the equation. Welcome to the deep dive, by the way.
Glad to be here.
So, today our mission is to decode that massive, frustrating gap between knowing a strategy in theory and actually executing it when the stakes are real.
Which is a gap we all deal with, right?
Totally. And we're looking at a really fascinating stack of strategy and training materials today. It's from an AI-powered analytic system called RangeFlow.
Yeah, and what's so interesting is that this isn't about language learning or public speaking at all.
No, not at all. We are using the high-stakes, just ruthless world of cash game poker as our laboratory today.
Which is perfect for this. I mean, the underlying cognitive psychology they're unpacking in this data, it applies to almost any complex skill you're trying to master.
Right, because we're basically looking at how the human brain acquires mastery, how it processes risk, and, well, why intelligent people consistently abandon logic when they're under pressure.
They just throw it right out the window.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if you have ever hit a plateau in a hobby or your career or a sport, the standard advice you get from everyone is always the exact same.
Oh, I know what you're going to say. Just put in the reps.
Exactly. Just put in the reps. Just do it more. But the data from RangeFlow argues that this whole volume approach is actually a massive destructive trap.
It really is. The core argument here completely upends that old 10,000 hours rule we always hear about.
The Malcolm Gladwell thing.
Right. Because repetition without active, objective feedback, it doesn't build mastery.
Yeah.
It just builds permanence.
Oh, wow. Permanence.
Yeah. Like imagine you're trying to improve your golf swing, but you have a slight, unnoticeable hitch in your mechanics.
Okay.
If you go to the driving range and hit 10,000 golf balls, you haven't magically become a better golfer. You've just permanently hardwired a fundamentally flawed swing into your nervous system.
You basically built a neurological superhighway for a bad habit.
Exactly. You were just reinforcing the error.
And the material points out how we try to fix this by passively consuming content, too. Like,
Right.
We watch hours of YouTube tutorials, we read forums, buy all the books.
Which feels productive, but it's not.
Right. The sources say that watching 100 hours of high-level poker analysis to fix your own game it's like watching someone else do heady push-ups and expecting your own chest to get bigger.
That's a great analogy. Your neurological pathways aren't actually firing. There's no muscle memory being built at all.
But wait, I have to push back a little on this idea that just playing is bad.
Sure.
Isn't real-world experience ultimately the best teacher? I mean, it feels like trying to learn the guitar just by listening to Jimi Hendrix records and studying music theory.
Right. Eventually you have to actually play.
Yeah, you can't just study. You have to pick up the instrument, get your hands dirty, and just play the thing.
Well, what's fascinating here is that you absolutely do have to get your hands dirty. But the distinction the data highlights is between guided experience and unguided experience.
Okay, guided versus unguided.
Right. So taking your Jimi Hendrix analogy, he had immediate, perfectly correlated auditory feedback. He hit a wrong note, it sounded terrible, and his brain instantly registered the error and adjusted.
Because the feedback is instant.
Exactly. But in a complex environment like poker or investing or business negotiations, the feedback loop is often obscured by luck.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, you can make the worst, most statistically disastrous decision possible, but still win the hand because a lucky card just happened to fall on the river.
So your brain literally rewards you for a terrible decision.
Which is exactly what keeps players stranded at a break-even plateau for 5, sometimes 10 years.
Just stuck.
Yeah, they play constantly, but they're relying on heuristics, mental shortcuts, and gut instinct.
And gut instinct is pretty flawed.
Highly flawed. It's susceptible to cognitive fatigue, emotional tilt, bias, all of it. So the RangeFlow system proposes that unguided play is actually dangerous.
Because it cements those flaws.
Right. You need a structured environment that forces you to practice the thinking process itself, not just the physical clicking of buttons.
So you need to be put in a complex spot, make a choice, and instantly be told by this cold, emotionless algorithm, here is the optimal mathematical line.
And here's exactly why your gut instinct was wrong.
Yes. Okay, so if unguided practice just hardwires our cognitive flaws, the logical fix is to study the perfect mathematical theory of the game, right?
You would think so.
In poker, the sources call this GTO, or game theory optimal. It's like the John Nash beautiful mind approach to the game.
Right. It's this mathematically perfect, unexploitable, chess-like strategy.
So a player studies this perfect theory, memorizes all the charts, sits down at the casino table, and according to the data, they get absolutely crushed.
Yeah, this is perhaps the most painful paradox for a developing player to confront.
I bet.
The RangeFlow database contains over 4 million analyzed cash game hands. 4 million.
That is a massive sample size.
Huge. And when you filter that data for the thinking players, the ones who have studied the high-level theory, who know the math, who are trying to play perfectly,
Tryhards, basically.
right, the tryhards, the finding is staggering. The average theoretical player makes exactly 47 specific, predictable mistakes every single session.
Wait, really? 47?
Every single session.
We aren't talking about a run of bad luck then, or just a couple of minor slip-ups. That is a systemic failure of execution.
It absolutely is.
But why? I mean, if they're deploying a mathematically perfect strategy, how is their brain short-circuiting dozens of times a night?
Because they're playing a solved, theoretically perfect game against unsolved, highly emotional, and completely unpredictable human opponents.
Oh, okay.
To use the metaphor from the text, they are bringing a grandmaster chess strategy
Yeah.
to a game of checkers.
Right.
And then they're experiencing massive cognitive dissonance when the opponent just jumps their pieces in a way that isn't supposed to exist in the chess manual.
That makes so much sense. Let's ground this for a second, because the material introduces a concept the AI uses heavily called EV, or expected value.
Yes, EV is the core metric.
Right, and as I understand it, EV is basically the math of the multiverse. Like, if you face the exact same decision 1,000 times in 1,000 parallel universes, EV is the average amount of money that decision makes or loses.
That is a great way to describe it.
So an AI tells you a play is plus EV, meaning it's mathematically profitable over the long run. Are you saying that a mathematically perfect, positive EV play can actually be the wrong play?
I am. It fundamentally changes based on context.
How so?
Well, the correct positive EV play in a theoretical vacuum assumes that the opponent sitting across the table is also playing optimally and rationally.
Which we know they aren't.
Exactly. The math relies on them acting in their own best interest. But if they aren't, consider a scenario where the GTO math dictates you should run a highly complex multi-street bluff.
Okay.
The math says you do this because, statistically, your opponent must fold their mediocre hand by the end of it.
But the opponent is what the poker world calls a calling station.
Right.
Like a player who just doesn't understand the complex narrative you're trying to tell with your bets. They just like their cards, they don't want to fold, and they simply call every single bet you make.
Yes. And in that scenario, if you execute the mathematically perfect bluff against a player who is oblivious to the math, you aren't playing brilliant poker.
You're just lighting your own money on fire.
Exactly. Your theoretical perfection is actively being punished by their ignorance.
Oh, man, that is incredibly frustrating. You do everything perfectly by the book. You calculate the odds, balance your ranges, execute the master plan.
And the guy who doesn't even know the book exists takes your entire stack of chips.
And the irony is that the good player probably walks away from the table furious, convinced they're just experiencing a streak of terrible luck.
Or that the game itself is rigged. But the AI data shows they are bleeding chips because they refuse to adapt to reality.
They're stubbornly clinging to what they were taught is correct in a vacuum.
Right, rather than observing the messy, irrational human behavior that is actually happening right in front of them.
So if unguided playing just builds bad habits and theoretical perfection gets completely dismantled by unpredictable humans?
Then what do you do?
Yeah. It seems like the only variable left to exploit is the unpredictability itself. You have to stop playing the cards and start playing the player.
You have to access the metagame. The sources refer to this hidden layer as poker in poker.
Poker in poker, I like that.
The goal is no longer to play a flawless mathematical baseline. The goal is to build a psychological profile of the specific person sitting across from you and surgically attack their cognitive biases.
And the materials outline a mindset for this, right? They call it the donk hunter.
Yes, the donk hunter.
Now, donk is an old poker pejorative for a reckless player who makes seemingly irrational decisions. But the strategy here isn't to be arrogant or mad at them.
No, not at all. Emotion has no place here.
Right. The goal is to study the precise architecture of how they give their money away. It shifts the entire paradigm. It's not about the statistics of the deck anymore. It is entirely about exploiting human behavioral tendencies.
And the true value of those 4 million hands of data is that it actually quantifies human irrationality. It turns psychology into actionable metrics.
Can you give an example of that?
Sure. For example, the data points out that 67% of the player pool will overfold, meaning they throw away winning hands, far too often when they are faced with 3 consecutive large bets on a board that looks particularly dangerous.
Wow, 67%. That's a huge edge.
It is. Or, this statistic, which is even crazier, 81% of aggressive players will completely shut down and surrender the pot if they face a check raise on a paired board.
Wait, 81%? That absolutely blew my mind when I read it.
Let's break down the neuroscience of why that 81% statistic exists, because it's fascinating.
Yeah, please do.
So an aggressive player likes to dictate the pace, right? They're the bully of the table.
Right.
A paired board means 2 cards of the exact same rank are dealt face up, say 2 8s. This is terrifying in poker because it means someone could easily hold a full house or 4 of a kind.
Okay, so the board is scary.
Very scary. So the bully makes their standard aggressive bet, and suddenly you raise them. You aggressively come over the top.
The bully gets punched in the mouth.
Exactly. You trigger an amygdala hijack in their brain. Their brain perceives an immediate massive threat. Cortisol spikes, the fight or flight response kicks in, and because the board is paired and looks so dangerous, they almost universally choose flight.
So 81% of the time, they fold.
Right. And once you understand that biological mechanism, you stop looking at your own cards.
You don't ask, is my hand strong enough to raise?
No, you ask, what does this specific opponent's brain do when confronted with unexpected aggression?
Here is where it gets really interesting, to use a baseball analogy.
There really is one.
It's less about knowing the exact aerodynamic physics of how a curveball drops to the air, right?
Right.
It's more about knowing that the specific batter standing at the plate has a psychological panic attack every single time they see a curveball approaching. You just throw the curveball, regardless of whether your grip is perfect, because you know the human being holding the bat is biologically hardwired to flinch.
That analogy perfectly isolates the mechanism. Exploiting these human cognitive leaks is how you fundamentally shrink variance in your results.
Variance being the statistical roller coaster of winning and losing just based on card luck.
Exactly. If you only play the math of the cards, you are forever at the mercy of probability.
Which is terrifying.
It is. But if you rely on behavioral data, if you know a player's fight or flight response triggers too easily, you can bluff them with a napkin.
Exactly.
Seriously, you aren't relying on the deck anymore. You're relying on the fact that human beings are reliably, predictably irrational under pressure.
It's like unlocking the matrix. You stop seeing code and you just see human frailty.
That's a great way to put it.
But realizing this behavioral metagame exists is one thing. How do you actually train your brain to recognize these patterns in real time? Because the sources are very clear. You don't need to quit your job, move to Vegas, and grind 12 tables for 8 hours a day to master this.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
In fact, they lay out a highly specific, constraint-based 20-minute daily blueprint for mastery.
Okay, a 20-minute blueprint. How does that work?
The efficiency of this routine is what makes it so compelling. It avoids the trap of cognitive overload. It's divided into 3 distinct phases: pre-game, in-game awareness, and post-game review.
Okay, let's start with the pregame. The text says it's just 5 minutes.
Just 5 minutes. Most people sit down to a complex task, whether it's a poker session, a sales call, a major presentation, by simply showing up, turning on their computer, and hoping their instincts will guide them.
Which the text compares to a professional athlete walking onto the field without stretching or looking at the playbook. You just click sit down on the app and start reacting.
Exactly. The 5-minute pregame routine acts as a neurological circuit breaker. You review your last 3 sessions to anchor yourself.
Okay.
But the critical mechanism here is constraint. You pick one single focus point for the entire night.
Just one.
Just one, not 12 strategic concepts. For example, your goal might be, tonight I am only going to focus on check-raising the flop more often when I have a drawing hand.
Let's clarify a drawing hand for a second for the listener. That just means you don't have a made hand yet, but you have the potential for a great one.
Right, like holding 2 hearts in your hand and seeing 2 hearts on the board. You are drawing to find that 5th heart for a flush.
And normally people just passively call bets hoping to get lucky.
Yeah.
The focus point here is forcing yourself to play that hand aggressively.
Yes.
I love the constraint of picking just one thing, because under pressure, your working memory cannot process a checklist of 12 new theories. It defaults to panic mode.
Exactly. But if you give your brain one single concrete mission, it can actually execute.
Okay, so that takes care of the pregame. What happens during the actual game?
This is where extreme discipline is required.
Okay.
When you are not actively involved in a hand, which in poker is most of the time, you are actually still playing the game.
But most players don't do that, right? The second they fold their cards, they just check out.
Oh yeah, they pick up their phone, they scroll social media, they diffuse their attention completely.
Because they still believe the game is about the cards. Like, if I don't hold any cards, there is no game being played right now.
But if the real game is poker, in poker, the metagame of human behavior, then the time you aren't in a hand is your most critical data gathering window.
Okay.
Human beings constantly leak data. You need to be building a mental model of the table dynamics.
So you're looking for things like who just suffered a terrible string of luck and is visibly frustrated, entering a state of emotional tilt.
Right, or who is suddenly playing terrified and passive because they just lost half their money. This information is the key to exploiting them later.
And it's completely free, it is broadcasting right in front of you, but you completely miss it if your attention is fractured by your phone.
Exactly, you have to stay locked in.
Okay, so you execute your 5-minute pregame, you stay highly focused during the session, gathering behavioral intel on your opponents. Now we hit the postgame.
The postgame review.
Right. The sources say you have about a 15-minute window immediately after you finish where the cognitive friction of the session is still fresh in your memory.
Yes, that window is crucial. You're supposed to flag 2 to 3 specific hands to review.
But the key here is not to review the massive cinematic pots where you won or lost your entire stack, right?
No, because the massive pots usually play themselves. The math dictates the outcome, and there really isn't much to learn.
So what are we flagging?
The hands you need to flag are the decision points that caused you cognitive friction.
The spots where you hesitated.
Exactly. The spots where the math felt murky, you weren't entirely sure what to do, and you ultimately just went with your gut instinct. Those moments of hesitation are your personal curriculum.
They're the exact coordinates of your leaks.
Precisely. And here is where the RangeFlowAI finally enters the picture. You take those 2 or 3 friction points, and you feed the exact parameters of the hand into the system.
And it runs millions of simulations.
Right. It breaks down the exact mathematical expected value of every possible option you had. It shows you the optimal GTO play, and crucially, it shows you how the actual human player pool generally reacts in that specific spot.
So it takes that murky, unquantifiable gut feeling and translates it into a concrete, objective lesson.
You instantly see where your intuition aligns with mathematical reality and where your intuition is actively betraying you and costing you money.
I have to be honest, this sounds deeply exhausting.
It's not easy, no.
Like after a long, stressful session where maybe you lost money, the idea of sitting down for 15 minutes to systematically dissect your own flaws and hesitations, it is so much easier to just blame a bad beat.
Oh, absolutely.
To just tell yourself, oh, the other guy just got incredibly lucky, the universe was just against me tonight.
It is infinitely easier to blame the universe. Blaming external factors protects the ego. But the architecture of mastery fundamentally requires the systematic dismantling of your ego.
Wow.
The intense discomfort of looking at your own flawed decision-making in black and white data. That is the exact mechanism of growth.
No pain, no gain, I guess.
And if you reframe the math of the time commitment, it is 20 minutes a day. 5 minutes pre-game, 15 minutes post-game.
It sounds negligible when you put it like that.
It does. But that routine compounds to over 120 hours of active, highly focused, constraint-based, feedback-driven training in a single year.
120 hours of pure, targeted practice, completely customized to your personal weaknesses.
Most people who play this game or practice any complex skill for a decade will never accumulate 120 hours of truly active study.
That's crazy to think about.
They'll accumulate thousands of hours of passively reinforcing their own bad habits. This is the anatomical breakdown of why people get stuck at the same skill plateau for years. They are trapped in the comfortable illusion of unguided repetition.
So, bringing this all back down to earth, what does this mean for you, the listener? Even if you never shuffle a deck of cards, even if you never sit down at a poker table in your life.
The blueprint laid out in these sources is universal.
Right. Whether you're trying to become a more persuasive public speaker, a sharper negotiator in your business, or you're just trying to finally learn that language so you don't freeze up at the coffee shop in Rome.
It requires abandoning the warm comfort of passive learning. You cannot just watch the experts lift the weights and expect to get stronger.
You have to put yourself in the environment, you have to make the mistakes under pressure.
And you absolutely must have an objective system that tells you exactly why your instinct was wrong, so you don't make the same mistake tomorrow.
You have to step away from the ego protection of telling yourself you're, putting in the reps and submit yourself to the uncomfortable, highly specific feedback loops that actually build neurological pathways.
It's the only way.
And looking at all this data brings to mind a rather chilling thought to leave you with today.
It really does.
Mm.
Consider the implications of this data for a second.
Yeah.
If a software system can analyze 4 million instances of human interaction and discover 47 perfectly predictable, statistically verified ways that highly intelligent people irrationally self-destruct under pressure.
What predictable, invisible mistakes are we making?
Exactly. When you sit down to negotiate a salary, when you make a major business decision, or when you are navigating a tense interpersonal conflict.
What are our 47 leaks simply because we don't have an AI tracking our behavior to illuminate our blind spots?
That's a tough question to answer.
It really makes you wonder what your own personal donk hunter would see if they were sitting across from you, building a psychological profile of your panic responses in the game of life.
We'd probably see a lot.
Remember that feeling of stepping off the plane and completely blanking on the language you spent 6 months studying? Maybe the problem wasn't your memory at all.
No, maybe you just spent all your time safely reading the theoretical textbook, when you should have been actively practicing how to survive the panic of the actual conversation.
Until next time, keep digging deeper.